Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Namibian marine phosphate is undertaking the Sandpiper project offshore of Walvis Bay in the Atlantic Ocean in search of phosphate. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Firstly, can you tell us a bit more about phosphate seafloor mining and also what makes this such an impressive proposition for the company?
You know, the whole idea of phosphates being in greater demand is a result of the world becoming more prosperous. And phosphate is therefore a key ingredient for food and food security. And there's a concern that the supply is constrained. So the idea now is to search everywhere for phosphates. But the dripping roast in the Namibian question is that you don't have to sink a shaft. It's not like the normal mining where you have to sink a shaft. It costs a lot of money. You don't have to even remove overburden like you would have to do, with an open cast mine. You've got this sandy phosphate that can be drawn up by dredgers, suction devices, and then partly processed on the ship and taken to shore for further processing. All right, it's not going to fetch the high price that the Rolls-Royce of phosphates attracts from Morocco, things like that, which is going at about $200 a tonne, but it is in the range of $145 a tonne, and they see it as a very viable proposition in Namibia, off Namibia, hoping that this will be a win-win situation so that the people of Namibia can also benefit not only through jobs but taxes and royalties and all the other spin-offs.
Now, how can Namibian phosphate mining be sure that their environmental aspect is completely fine?
Yeah, well, I think that they are having some tough questions asked from the environmental lobby. The Swakopmund matters. They are yapping at their heels, and I think rightly so, because you've got to protect the fisheries industry there. You can't come in with a new industry that upsets an old industry. But one thing that's got to be borne in mind by the people of Namibia, that the diamond miners have been doing marine mining for decades now, so the whole principle has been applied for some time. Now along come the phosphate miners, and it has upset a lot of the environmentalists. The company is going to go all out to make sure that it does everything that is environmentally correct and sensitive. And one of the things that they are planning to do is not to mine to bedrock, so that they will leave a sediment of phosphate there, so that the ocean life doesn't have to look for a new habitat. Whereas I'm not too sure whether the diamond miners actually do that.
Because it would be disastrous if the whole population were to die out.
That's for sure.
Now, how is a project like this funded, and when do they expect to start making money back from it?
They're looking at 50% equity, which means the shareholding will be 50%. The shareholders will provide money for 50% of the capital, and we're looking at a capital figure of about $326 million US, and then the other 50% will be raised through debt. And the institutions that they're going to, in a case like this, is typical. They're going to the developmental finance institutions, the Development Bank of Southern Africa and the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa, which is state-owned, and other developmental institutions. But they say that there is an appetite for this because of the whole background of food security. World food security is an issue. The demand building, the price being quite strong. This is attracting funds, they tell me, but it's very much Australian-backed. The Australian company Mine Makers, listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and also UCL Resources, also listed on the ASX. And then the local partner is Tungani, which has got 15%. So the Australians dominate in the shareholding. They are seeing to the fundraising. And it's interesting to go back, a few years, because the original proposer of this project was Mike Woodburn, who's a South African, whom we know from these parts. He had Bonaparte Minerals, and this was his proposal, and he's still involved. So it shows the South African diaspora scatters out there, but somehow or other they're attracted back to Africa, and we see with his diamond mining experience now looking to mining the seas for phosphate to make sure that we get this vital nutrient into the world where there is some concern about its supply.
When do they expect to start mining?
Well, they feel they're at the ready point. I think it's the environmental lobby which still has to be satisfied. So they're looking at the end of 2013 or the beginning of 2014, so it's fairly near term, but they have been working on this, Bonaparte has been working on this for quite a long time and giving presentations. They feel that they've met what the law requires from an environmental legislation point of view, but they need to be able to communicate more with the people, and that's what the government is urging them to do. They've done the sea-based environmental impact assessment. That is in with the government already. They've still got to do the land-based environmental impact assessment, and they will use that next land-based assessment to communicate more with people. Because one thing we did find, the moment we flighted this story online, we were flooded by environmental reaction, particularly from Swakopmund Matters. You know, they are really determined that the fisheries industry is not disturbed. Their standpoint is that it's either fisheries or mining. It cannot be both. But I think where their argument falls flat is that there's already been mining, particularly the diamond mining there. So they will have to make sure that they're very sensitive, that they take the environmental considerations into account. And people who want to see a video on it, I think they should go onto our site, miningweekly.com, and then look for multimedia, click on the multimedia and go into video clips and look at this seafloor phosphate mining headline. They'll get a very good insight into how this will work, because there's a sort of a story of how the ship will scratch this off the seabed and how it will be sucked up into the vessel, etc. It's quite a good rendition of how this will all work. So people can go in and have a look at that. But of course, I think that the company realizes it's still going to have to sit down with these environmental lobbyists. And of course, they do so there under the name Namibian Marine Phosphates. But at the background of all that are these Australian listed companies, you know, Mine Makers and UCL Resources. And there is a bit of a tic-tac between these two companies because you've been seeing quite a few reports coming out that the shareholders of one are making bids for the other. And so there is quite a lot of interest in this project. Shareholding-wise, you know, they want to try and get more control from one base. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, because it's never good to have shareholders at each other's throats, because that can upset the apple cart. But I think in this case, they are showing that the asset is a good one. The shareholders got an appetite to get more percentage of the project.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. It's always nice to chat to you.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.